I, 28F, always thought I was the luckiest girl in the world. After years of bad relationships and one almost marriage that crashed and burned, I finally met Daniel, 30M. He was everything I thought I wanted. Stable, kind, ambitious without being arrogant, and most importantly, someone who made me feel safe. We'd been dating for just over 2 years when he proposed. It wasn't some over-the-top proposal in front of a crowd or something cheesy lifted from TikTok. It was private, quiet, intimate. Just us in our living room with takeout pizza and cheap champagne, and I swear I cried harder than if he had done it on the top of the Eiffel Tower. The first few weeks of being engaged were a dream. My friends were genuinely happy for me. My parents adored him. I couldn't stop staring at the ring on my finger, even though it wasn't huge or flashy. It was perfect because it was from him, or so I thought. The first red flag came with the wedding planning. I wanted something simple. Around 80 guests, a beautiful outdoor ceremony, and a cozy reception with food and music we actually liked. Nothing extravagant. Daniel agreed at first, but then his family got involved. That's when things started feeling off. His mom insisted on inviting her extended family, which turned out to mean over 200 people. His sister, Claire, 32F, who I'd always thought was cold but tolerable, suddenly inserted herself into every planning decision. Venue, flowers, music, food. She had an opinion on everything, and those opinions were presented as non-negotiable. When I tried to push back, Daniel would get this tense look and say, "Babe, it's just easier if we let them have what they want. You know how they are." But that was the thing. I didn't really know how they are. I'd always felt like a guest in his family rather than a member. They were polite enough to me, but there was a distance I could never quite bridge. And now that the wedding was becoming less about us and more about them, that distance felt like a chasm. One night, I overheard Claire on the phone while I was in the kitchen getting water. She didn't know I was in earshot. I heard her say, "Don't worry, he'll come to his senses. This wedding isn't going to happen the way she thinks it will." At first, I brushed it off as me misinterpreting her tone. But then, a few days later, my best friend pulled me aside and told me she'd seen Daniel and Claire in a coffee shop, arguing. According to her, Claire had said something like, "She's not right for this family. You know it. Don't be weak." When I asked Daniel about it, he got defensive. He told me I was overreacting, that his sister was just being protective, and that the last thing we needed was more drama. He swore he wanted to marry me, that nothing would change that. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening behind the scenes. That my fiancé, my future husband, wasn't telling me the full story. And then last week, I found something that changed everything. I was helping Daniel tidy up his office when I found an envelope tucked into his desk drawer. It wasn't hidden exactly, but it also wasn't something he'd ever mentioned. Inside were receipts, wedding-related expenses. Only, they weren't for anything I'd approved. There were deposits for a completely different venue than the one we'd toured together. Orders for catering I'd never chosen. Payments to a band I'd never even heard of. It was like an entire wedding had been planned without me. When I confronted Daniel, he froze. He didn't deny it. He just sat there in silence while I stared at him, my heart racing, waiting for him to explain. Finally, he said, "It's complicated. Please, just trust me." And that's where I'm stuck. Do I trust him? Or do I dig deeper, even if I might find something I can't come back from? Because right now, I feel like I'm engaged to a stranger. After I found those receipts, something inside me shifted. Up until that moment, I had been the chill fiancé. I let things slide. I brushed off red flags. I told myself don't be a bridezilla. But staring at those invoices for a wedding I didn't recognize, I realized I wasn't crazy. Something was being hidden from me. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake next to Daniel, listening to him breathe, wondering how the man I thought I knew so well could plan a completely different wedding behind my back. I wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation. But reasonable explanations usually don't come in the form of secret deposits and catering menus you've never even seen. The next morning, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. Snoop. I know, snooping is always portrayed as the toxic thing in relationships. But when your gut is screaming at you that something is wrong, you don't just sit on your hands. At least I couldn't. So while Daniel was at work, I went back into his office. I opened his laptop. And yes, I know his password. He gave it to me months ago when I helped him with some documents. I told myself that if I didn't find anything suspicious, I would stop. But I found more than I ever could have imagined. There was a whole email thread between him, his mom, and Claire. Dozens of messages back and forth. Subject lines like, approved guest list, and revised seating chart. Attached PDFs with flower arrangements I'd never picked. An Excel sheet that had the final head count at 245 guests. 245. I'd originally wanted 80. And the worst part? They referred to me in third person. Not as a collaborator, not as someone whose opinion mattered, but as an obstacle. Lines like, she doesn't need to know about this yet. Or if she pushes back, we'll handle it. I sat there in his office chair, scrolling through those emails with my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the mouse. At one point, Claire had written, this wedding has to be done the right way. We can't let her ruin it. Couldn't breathe. What did she mean, ruin it? It's my wedding too. When Daniel came home that night, I didn't say anything. I needed time to process, to figure out how to approach this without completely exploding. But I must not be as good at hiding my emotions as I thought, because he noticed right away. You okay, babe? He asked. And I lied. I smiled, kissed him, said I was just tired. But inside I was a storm. The next day I decided to test something. I casually mentioned an idea for the wedding, something small, like using a local bakery for desserts instead of the fancy overpriced caterer his mom wanted. Daniel froze for just a split second before plastering on his smile. That's a nice idea, he said, but his tone was tight. Let's keep it in mind. Translation: it's not happening. That's when I realized the horrible truth. This wasn't our wedding. It wasn't even his wedding. This was his family's wedding, and I was just a prop they needed to make it happen. The final straw came 2 days later. Claire showed up at our apartment unannounced, holding a binder thicker than a college textbook. She plopped it on the table and started flipping through pages of color swatches, menus, and seating charts. I tried to interject. Actually, I was thinking something more simple, but she cut me off. This is what's been decided. Daniel agrees. You'll see, it'll be beautiful. And Daniel? He just sat there, silent. No defense, no pushback, no this is her wedding too. That night, I finally confronted him. I told him I'd seen the receipts. I told him I knew about the emails. His face went pale. For a moment, he looked like a little boy caught stealing cookies. Then he sighed and said, I didn't want you to stress. My family, they have certain expectations. It's easier to just let them handle things. I stared at him in disbelief. So you're telling me my only role in this wedding is to show up in a dress and smile for pictures? He reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. It's not like that. I don't want to fight with them. They've always been like this. Always been like this. And he thought that was a justification? That was the moment I realized I wasn't just fighting for a wedding. I was fighting for a voice in my own relationship. And right now, I wasn't sure I had one. After that confrontation with Daniel, I felt like the ground under me had cracked open. I wasn't just dealing with an overbearing mother-in-law cliché. This was something else, something more insidious. Claire wasn't just helping. She was orchestrating. And Daniel, whether out of fear or loyalty, was letting her pull all the strings. The next few days were unbearable. Daniel acted like nothing had happened. He kissed me goodnight, texted me at work, cracked jokes while we cooked dinner, as if I hadn't just caught him planning an entire alternate wedding behind my back. I tried to play along, but my mind was running in circles. Couldn't let it go. Why was Claire so invested? Why did it feel like she was determined to erase me from my own wedding? So I did something I'm not proud of. I reached out to someone in his family directly. Daniel's cousin, Melissa, had always been friendly to me. She didn't have the sharp, judgmental tone his mom and sister used. She was younger, closer to my age, and she'd once told me privately that the family could be intense. I figured if anyone would be honest, it would be her. I texted her asking if she'd be up for coffee. Just the two of us. She agreed. When we sat down at a little cafe across town, I didn't dance around it. I told her straight up, I feel like Claire doesn't want this wedding to happen. Am I crazy? Melissa froze, then looked around like she was making sure no one else was listening. She lowered her voice. You're not crazy, she said. Claire has history. She's always tried to control Daniel's relationships. That word history sent a chill through me. I pressed her, and at first she resisted, saying she didn't want to get in the middle. But after I practically begged, she finally sighed and told me the truth. Apparently, Claire had a falling out with her fiancé years ago. A messy breakup, public, humiliating. Since then, she'd developed this fixation. According to Melissa, every time Daniel dated someone seriously, Claire would find a way to interfere. She'd criticize, undermine, plant doubts. Sometimes Daniel would even break up with the girl after Claire got too involved. She doesn't think anyone's good enough for him, Melissa said. It's like she needs him to stay dependent on her. It's creepy, honestly. My stomach twisted. Suddenly, all of Claire's cold smiles and passive-aggressive comments made sense. She didn't just dislike me. She needed to sabotage me. When I got home, I tried to bring this up with Daniel gently. I told him what Melissa had said, that maybe his sister had unhealthy boundaries with him. He immediately shut down. Melissa doesn't know what she's talking about, he snapped. Claire's just protective. She's been there for me my whole life. You don't get to judge her. His words cut me more deeply than he realized. You don't get to judge her. As if I was some outsider trespassing on sacred ground. As if I wasn't supposed to have an opinion about the person actively dismantling my wedding. That night, I couldn't stop replaying Melissa's warning. If Claire had interfered in every serious relationship Daniel had ever had, what made me think I was different? And then something happened that confirmed my worst fears. I came home from work 2 days later to find Claire sitting on my couch. In my apartment, with my fiancé. They were drinking wine, laughing like I wasn't even part of this equation. When I walked in, the room went awkwardly silent. Claire gave me this smug little smile, like she'd been waiting for me to catch them. We were just talking about the wedding, she said sweetly. Don't worry, everything's under control. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to correct her, to say that we were in control. But he didn't. He just stared at the floor. That was when it hit me. Claire didn't just want to control the wedding. She wanted to control him, and she was winning. After that night with Claire sitting on my couch like she owned the place, something in me snapped. This wasn't just family meddling. This was invasion. My own fiancé couldn't even set a boundary in our shared apartment. I couldn't stop thinking about the way he avoided my eyes, how he let Claire speak for us, how he didn't even flinch when she said, everything's under control. Under her control, not mine. Not his, hers. I finally decided I couldn't play nice anymore. The next morning, I told Daniel point blank, if Claire is at our apartment without my permission again, I'm done. This is our home, not hers. He froze, his coffee mug halfway to his lips, and said quietly, she's just trying to help. Help, I snapped. She's planning a wedding I don't even recognize. She's making decisions behind my back. She acts like I'm just some placeholder. And you let her. Daniel rubbed his temples. He looked tired, older somehow. Finally, he said something that made my stomach twist. You don't understand. Claire's done everything for me. After Dad left, after Mom fell apart, it was Claire who took care of me. She gave up her own life to raise me. I owe her everything. I just stared at him. That was the first time he'd ever explained it, and suddenly the puzzle pieces clicked. His loyalty to her wasn't just about family bonds. It was about guilt, obligation, a debt he felt he could never repay. Daniel, I said carefully, you don't owe her your life. You're allowed to grow up. You're allowed to put yourself first. You're allowed to put us first. But he just shook his head. You don't get it. If I go against her, I lose her. And I can't. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just fighting a bossy sister-in-law. I was fighting a dynamic that had been cemented for decades. And Claire knew it. Over the next week, she ramped up her interference. She called Daniel 3-4 times a day. She accidentally left bridal magazines on our doorstep. She even started contacting vendors directly, introducing herself as if she were the bride. The final straw came when I received an email from the florist, confirming an order I had never made. White lilies, cascading arrangements, total cost, over $4,000. I nearly choked. Not only had Claire hijacked my flowers, but she had used our joint bank account to pay the deposit. When I confronted Daniel, I expected outrage. I expected at least some kind of solidarity. Instead, he looked guilty, then mumbled, "Claire thought it would be more elegant, and she had my card on file from before." That broke me. "So she has access to your bank information, too?" I demanded. He didn't answer, which told me everything. That night, I called my best friend, Kayla, and poured everything out. She didn't even try to be diplomatic. "Girl, this is insane. She's not just overstepping. She's treating you like you don't exist. And he's letting her. You need to decide if you're marrying him or if you're marrying them." Her words hit me like a punch, because she was right. If Daniel couldn't separate from Claire, then this marriage wasn't going to be between two people. It was going to be between three. The next day, I decided to test something. I told Daniel I wanted to elope. Just the two of us. No big wedding, no family drama, no Claire. His face went pale. He didn't even think about it. "I can't do that," he said immediately. "My family would never forgive me." "What about me?" I asked softly. "Do you care if I forgive you?" He didn't answer. That silence told me everything I needed to know. After Daniel's refusal to even consider eloping, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. He didn't hesitate. He didn't even pretend to weigh my feelings against his family's. The answer was instant. No. That night, while he slept, I sat on the couch with my laptop, staring at the joint bank account we'd set up months ago. It was supposed to be for wedding expenses, but when I scrolled through the transactions, my chest tightened. There were charges I didn't recognize. Not just the florist deposit, but catering invoices, payments to a string quartet, down payments on a luxury venue we hadn't agreed on. Thousands of dollars had already been spent. Without me. The kicker? Almost all of the charges had Claire listed as the contact name. Not Daniel. Not me. Claire. It was like I was a ghost bride, and Claire was the real one planning this entire event. I screenshotted everything, sent it to myself, then closed the laptop before Daniel could wake up. But my hands were shaking. My stomach was sick. This wasn't just about meddling, it was about control. Financial control. The next day, I decided I needed answers. I reached out to Melissa again, and this time I asked her straight up, "Does Claire have access to Daniel's finances?" Melissa hesitated, then nodded slowly. "She has for years." Their mom leaned on Claire to manage things after their dad left, and Daniel just never took it back. She handles his bills, his taxes, everything. Honestly, it's weird. I don't know any 30-year-old man who still lets his sister balance his checkbook. My jaw dropped. Daniel had never told me this. I'd assumed he was independent, financially responsible. But apparently, Claire was still pulling the strings, literally managing his money like he was a teenager with an allowance. I felt a wave of nausea. How could I have missed this? How could he not tell me? That night, I confronted him. I laid out the screenshots, the unexplained charges, the fact that his sister had been paying vendors with our account. His reaction, defensive. "You don't understand. She's better at this stuff than I am. She's always handled it. I don't see the problem." Couldn't believe my ears. "The problem is that I'm supposed to be your partner, not your sister. I didn't agree to her spending thousands of dollars of our money. I didn't even know she had access." But he just looked at me with this wounded expression, like I was the one being unreasonable. "I don't want to fight with you. I thought you'd appreciate that the stress was off your shoulders." Stress off my shoulders? Felt like he'd ripped out my spine. Later that week, Kayla came over with wine and takeout. She listened to everything and said something I hadn't even let myself think yet. Are you sure he's not marrying you just because it's convenient? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Claire's the one running this marriage already. Her words rattled me. I wanted to argue, to defend him, but deep down I couldn't. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized Daniel wasn't acting like a man about to start his own family. He was acting like a man afraid to leave the one he already had. And then, as if the universe wanted to hammer the point home, I got a phone call that changed everything. It was from the venue I had originally chosen, the small, cozy place that Daniel and I toured months ago. The manager called to confirm that we had canceled our reservation. Only I hadn't canceled it. When I asked who had, she said, "Your fiancé's sister." She said you two had decided to go in a different direction. I nearly dropped the phone. That was the moment I realized Claire wasn't just meddling. She was actively erasing me. When I hung up the phone with the venue, I was shaking so badly I had to sit down. Claire hadn't just gone behind my back. She had canceled my dream wedding. The place Daniel and I had toured together, the only venue I had actually felt excited about. It was gone. Just like that. I waited for him to come home that evening, pacing the apartment like a caged animal. By the time Daniel walked through the door, I was ready to explode. "Did you know Claire canceled the venue?" I blurted before he could even put his keys down. He froze. That hesitation, half a second, barely noticeable, told me everything. "Babe, listen." "Don't babe me," I snapped. "Did you know?" He sighed, rubbed the back of his neck, and finally muttered, "She told me she was going to." I didn't think it was a big deal. The other venue is nicer anyway. I laughed. Not a funny laugh. A bitter, broken laugh. Not a big deal? She erased the one thing I actually wanted for this wedding, and you didn't even bother to tell me? Daniel's face tightened. I didn't want to fight about it. My mom and Claire were never going to agree to that place. It's easier this way. Easier. That word echoed in my head like a gunshot. Everything with him was about making it easier for them. Not for me. "Do you even hear yourself?" I said, my voice shaking. "You're letting your sister plan our wedding like I'm not even here. She spends our money, cancels our venue, talks to vendors behind my back. And you're okay with it because it's easier?" His jaw clenched. "She's just trying to help. Why can't you see that?" "Because it's not help, Daniel. It's control. She's controlling you, she's controlling me, and she's controlling our marriage before it even starts." Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Finally, he whispered something that shattered me. "Maybe she just knows what's best." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. She knows what's best. Not me. Not us. Claire. "So what am I here for?" I asked quietly. "Am I just supposed to show up in a dress and smile for pictures while your sister marries us both?" His face twisted. "That's not fair." "No, Daniel. What's not fair is that I'm supposed to be your partner, but clearly, I'm just a guest in your family's play. You don't want a wife. You want a puppet who won't upset your sister." The fight escalated from there, voices raised, accusations flying. At one point he slammed his fist on the table and shouted, "Why can't you just go along with it?" I shot back. "Because it's not her wedding. It's mine too." We ended the night in silence. He slept on the couch. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my chest tight, my eyes burning, wondering how the hell my life had turned into this. But the worst part? Even in the middle of that screaming match, part of me could see it in his eyes. The fear, the guilt, the leash Claire still had around his neck. And I realized, as long as she had that leash, I would never really have him. The silence after our fight hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Daniel barely spoke to me for 2 days, and honestly, I didn't care. Something inside me had shifted. I was done begging him to choose me over his sister. If he couldn't see the problem by now, maybe he never would. But I wasn't about to let Claire stage manage the most important day of my life without a fight. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I started planning a wedding of my own. A backup wedding. Felt ridiculous at first. I mean, who secretly plans their own ceremony behind their fiancé's back? But then I thought about how Claire had canceled my venue, drained my account, picked my flowers, and practically shoved me out of the planning process. And I realized if she could scheme, so could I. I called the original venue manager, nearly in tears, and asked if there was any way they could squeeze us back in. She hesitated but said if we kept the guest list under 50, she could make something work on short notice. My heart leapt. It wasn't the big wedding I dreamed of, but maybe smaller was better. Maybe it could be mine. Next, I reached out to Kayla. She didn't even hesitate. "Whatever you need, I'm in," she said. "Tell me what role I play in this covert mission." Together, we started sketching it out. A secret ceremony with my closest friends and family, the people who actually loved me, not the 200 strangers Claire insisted on inviting. Simple flowers, good food, music that meant something to us. Not just classy background noise. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. But as I started piecing together my little secret wedding, I also began noticing more cracks in Daniel's facade. He was distracted all the time, glued to his phone. Whenever Claire called, he'd step out of the room. Once, I caught him deleting messages as soon as he hung up. Something wasn't right. One night, while he was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't, but curiosity won. It was a text from Claire. "Don't let her derail this. We've come too far. She'll thank us later." My blood ran cold. We've come too far. As if this wedding wasn't mine at all. As if I was some obstacle they needed to manage. That was the moment my secret plan solidified into something more than just a backup. It became my escape hatch. Because if Daniel stood in front of me on that altar and vowed his life to me while still tethered to his sister's leash, I would have a choice. Do I go through with the spectacle Claire had orchestrated? Or do I walk away and reclaim my own life on my own terms? I didn't know yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them write the ending for me. By the time I had my backup wedding half-sketched, I felt a strange mix of power and dread. Power because for once I had a plan of my own. Dread because deep down I knew this plan wasn't really about the wedding. It was about testing whether Daniel would ever put me before Claire. And then, the universe decided to answer that question in the ugliest way possible. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. Daniel was in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low but urgent. Normally, I'd respect his privacy. But after weeks of secrecy and manipulation, my ears practically tuned themselves. I caught fragments. "Yeah, I'll keep her out of it. She doesn't need to know. I told you I'd handle it." My stomach clenched. "She doesn't need to know." The second he hung up, I walked in casually, pretending I'd just been passing through. "Who was that?" I asked, forcing my tone light. He jumped like I'd caught him stealing. "No one. Work stuff." His eyes gave him away. I didn't push it then, but I knew I had to dig. So later that night, after he fell asleep, I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened his email again. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure it would wake him. And that's when I found it. Not just wedding emails this time. Something worse. An entire thread between Daniel and Claire. Not about the wedding, but about our future. Specifically, about where we'd live after the wedding. Apparently, while I'd been imagining moving into a modest little house together, starting fresh, maybe even beginning to plan for kids someday, Daniel and Claire had already made different plans. They had put a deposit down on a townhouse. Not for us. For them. The lease application listed both of their names. Daniel and Claire. Not me. My chest tightened. I scrolled further. Attached to the emails was a scanned bank statement. Our joint account. Showing the down payment. Claire had already moved money around to make it happen. Couldn't breathe. I literally had to put the laptop down and press my hands over my face to stop myself from screaming. When I finally confronted Daniel the next day, I didn't hold back. I shoved the printouts at him and said, "Explain this, now." His face drained of color. "It's not what you think." "Really? Because it looks like you're planning to move in with your sister after our wedding." He stammered, "It's just temporary, until we figure things out. Claire doesn't want to be alone. And what, Daniel? You think I'm going to marry you and then play second fiddle while you play house with your sister? He flinched. It's not like that. She sacrificed so much for me. I promised I'd take care of her. I can't just abandon her. Abandon her. Those were the words he chose, as if choosing me meant betraying her. I stood there, shaking, tears burning my eyes. So what about me, Daniel? What about us? When do I become your family? Or do I just never? He didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, his silence louder than any words. That was the moment something inside me broke. I realized this wasn't just about Claire sabotaging the wedding. This was about Daniel never being ready to leave her shadow. And if he wasn't ready now, he never would be. After seeing the emails, the bank statements, and realizing Daniel's plan to keep Claire in his life above me, I knew I had to act. Waiting, hoping, begging. It wasn't going to work. He wasn't choosing me. Not fully. Not when his loyalty, guilt, and fear were tied to his sister like some invisible chain. I called Kayla immediately. We're doing it. The wedding. Now, the backup wedding. It's happening this weekend. Just me, you, and the people who actually matter. She didn't even hesitate. Finally, let's burn this whole system down. I sent out last-minute invites to my parents, my siblings, a few close friends, and made sure no one from Daniel's family was included. I booked a small venue, the one that had squeezed us in at the last minute, and ordered flowers, cake, and a small photographer. Nothing extravagant, just enough to make it real. That weekend, I woke up early, heart hammering. I'd rehearsed this moment over and over. What if Daniel tried to stop me? What if Claire found out? But a small part of me whispered, you deserve this. At 2 p.m., I arrived at the venue, wearing the dress I'd bought months ago in secret. Kayla was already there, bustling with energy, making sure everything was perfect. My parents arrived next, looking bewildered but supportive. And then, Daniel called. Where are you? His voice was tense, scared. At the wedding, I said flatly. Mine. He froze. I could practically hear the blood draining from his face. What do you mean, yours? I mean, I'm marrying the people who actually care about me. You and Claire chose your path. I'm choosing mine. I hung up before he could respond. When I walked down the tiny aisle, it felt surreal. There was no pomp, no grand procession, no family-approved spectacle. Just the people who truly loved me, looking at me with smiles that actually meant something. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need Daniel to validate me. I didn't need Claire to approve. I didn't need a massive wedding to prove my worth. When I said my vows, I wasn't just committing to a partner. I was committing to myself, to my boundaries, my happiness, my life. And for the first time in weeks, I felt free. I don't know if Daniel will ever understand what he lost, or if Claire will ever forgive me for taking this step. But I do know one thing. I took back control. Because at the end of the day, the wedding wasn't about pleasing anyone else. It was about being true to me. And that was the most important vow I could ever keep. It's been a few weeks since my secret wedding, and life has settled into a strange, peaceful rhythm. Daniel hasn't called. Not really. I've answered his messages politely, but there's this invisible wall between us now. I don't know if our relationship can survive what happened. And honestly, I don't know if I want it to. Claire, predictably, is furious. She sent a passive-aggressive text that read, I hope you're happy making such impulsive choices. I didn't respond. Why would I? Her approval isn't necessary anymore. People keep asking me if I regret it. The answer is complicated. I lost the man I thought I loved, and a future I imagined. That stings. But I also gained something far more valuable. Myself. I finally realized that weddings aren't just about love. They're about control, trust, and respect. If your partner can't set boundaries with their family or protect you from manipulation, that's not a marriage. It's a hostage situation. I've learned that it's okay to take bold steps when your happiness is on the line. I've learned that silence, compliance, and patience can sometimes be the wrong approach. And I've learned that self-respect isn't negotiable. Reddit. Here's my question. Am I the asshole? I know the answers are going to be divided. Some will say I overreacted, that I should have worked things out with Daniel, that I should have forgiven Claire. Others will say I saved myself from a lifetime of manipulation and finally took a stand for my own happiness. I don't need universal approval, but I do need to know I acted with courage, not fear. I chose me when no one else would. I chose my life, my agency, my voice, and somehow that feels like the most adult thing I've ever done. I don't know if Daniel will ever see what he lost, but I do know this. I will never let anyone, not even the person I love, make me feel invisible again. And that feels like winning.